when we first started our podcast, we had to get like probably 3 or 4 different websites and services going at once to record it, to edit it, to host it, and then have it approved through iTunes. And now we use Anchor by Spotify, where it's just a one-stop shop where you can record, edit your podcast, and when you distribute it, it'll go to all the platforms. So it's just everything right in one place. And the best thing is it's totally free. So if you want to get started, if you're on the fence about starting a podcast, or if you have a podcast and you want to make it simpler, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast, where we bring the mind, body, and gym together so you can improve your health, increase performance, and live your best life. For more information, visit thinkfitnesslife.com. Here are your hosts, Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie.
Welcome back to Think Fitness Life podcast. Everything health related, fitness related. Talking a lot about mindset, and specifically today, not understanding clients or athletes. And it's a pretty wide topic, but we're going to try to hone in on some of the specifics. A big piece is just not listening enough. I will start with this. We were born with one mouth and 2 ears, so we should be listening twice as much as we're speaking. And then another quote I read recently was, every time you open your mouth, you reiterate something you already know, but every time you keep it shut, you might learn something new. So getting feedback from your clients, your athletes, super important. Understanding their mindset, their ambitions, their drives, their setbacks, their triggers. It all plays a role into the success or failures on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis for that client, for that individual, for that athlete. So, Eric, where would you like to take us?
Everywhere at once. I think it's a big, I would say issue, but thing that I've seen in this, especially in this industry as coaches, that we don't really understand or see the client where we think they need to be, if that makes sense, or where we want to be, or where they want to be. I think that's the most important thing. And seeing and observing some things, I know as professionals, we need to perfect movement and make sure this is all good, and we want to get them strong and all that. That's what's important to us. And we know that, and we know what people need. But at the same time, do we go too far there, coaches and trainers? Do we maybe go, hey, this is maybe not what the person wants? And a lot of times people don't listen to what the person or the client wants or the athlete wants. And I think it's very prevalent because we've seen this, whether it's sports teams, individuals, people have outside lives than training. Their day isn't revolved around coming in and doing deadlifts and med ball slams. That can be just minuscule to them. And you have to respect that. So what is it that really is driving this person? And I think a lot of times people fail to either understand that in themselves or understanding it for their client.
Yeah, I think a lot of times kind of feel like what you're referencing is just being agenda-based for the trainer. As a trainer, sometimes we get caught into the trap of having a specific agenda that doesn't align with that individual's needs or desires. And if it's something where they're an athlete and their needs or desires need to be aligned with the team or an organization, and they aren't on board with that, then it's the job of the trainer or professional to educate and help them understand and gain that perspective and understand why they're doing that med ball slam, why it's so important to, we'll go with the med ball slam example, to develop power, to develop speed, to be explosive, ballistic movements. There's no one size fits all. Whether the athlete is wrong or right is a whole different discussion. But just knowing that and understanding their needs and their desires is super important. I think the first confirmation of this came from reading about Scott Cochran. And for those of you who don't know that name, he was known as the highest paid strength and conditioning coach in the industry. And many of you probably know Alabama. He's won 6 national championships throughout his career working as the strength and conditioning coach at Alabama for over 13 years. And he is the man behind the scenes, so to speak, for building up this Alabama program. So they are looked at as one of the most prestigious and most influential football programs for the NFL. So anyone who's in the football realm understands, but outsiders looking in, you can just understand that he was their strength and conditioning coach working with all these athletes and built this winning team, this winning mindset. And a big part of his success was sitting down with each individual athlete, understanding what their home life was like, understanding what their daily stresses were like, what their common anxieties were like, because he knew ultimately that was what was going to figure out what's going to get in their way, and B, understanding that for him allowed him to overcome those and make a strong squad and unit. And that unit is made up of, it's a sum of all its parts. So each individual is a different case. And that was like the first time that I knew I was going down the right road when talking about stress and anxiety, because so many people want to just go right into what's their movement look like what does their squat pattern look like, their deadlift pattern look like, what are their squat numbers, what are their deadlift numbers, and sure, those play a role. But if you don't get the feedback and understand that individual's mindset, their ambitions, their drives and triggers, then you have a hammer and everything looks like a nail.
Right. And I think I've seen it time and time again. And even young in probably my career, it wasn't as prevalent. But what it kind of comes down to is it doesn't really matter how strong they are, how mobile they are, what they can do on a fan bike. It does, but it doesn't, right? At the end of the day, it comes down to what they want, what their mindset. And there was a seminar I went, and the guy spoke, and it was great. He basically said, above all else, what is most important to that person and that individual? It's not in a gym setting. It's not what they're there for that day. It's not any of that. It's other things. Some athletes I've had and have, it's not about squatting. They could care less. It's about what they have a passion for in life. Sometimes they're there kind of going through the motions. And that's where I see this disconnect. Going through the motions is because a coach or a trainer doesn't understand their client. Because if you don't understand them, you're going through the motions. But I feel if you do understand them and you get into their mindset and what makes them drive, what makes them click, what their life is like, you get a better understanding of how you can coach this individual and how your coaching will change because of this individual. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of times in this industry, trainers are either missing or clients don't also recognize if trainers can't get that. And I think that's the disconnect, right? We need to build this sensation of mindfulness through both, because that's how kind of relationship works. A trainer or coach with a client or athlete is buy-in. It's trust and commitment. And if you don't have that ability to look into their mindset and what their ambitions are in life, I think you're missing part of the commitment and trust. Then there can be a disconnect in a person. So they come in with pain and you're like, okay, let's just switch the exercise. And you're always changing the exercise, but you're never really addressing the pain and how they feel it and why they feel it and when they get it. That can be a tough thing because you're kind of moving the needle around that. And that's why I wanted to kind of sit down and basically go I don't think that's how it should be. So it kind of puts mindset at the top. People need to really understand what other humans and people are driving for? What kind of gets them out of bed each day?
I never thought that I'd hear Eric say that it's not about what you can produce on a fan bike, but but yeah, I think a piece there is to recognize that it is so common for coaches and trainers to fall into that trap. And I mean, you and I probably fall into it every day without even realizing it all the time, but because you only get an hour with these guys or these girls, and you already come in with a program written and an idea, but then you do need to always have like checks and balances in your approach to catch any things that are going to help you understand how they come in that day. Because sure, it is about consistently showing up, but the best thing you can do as a coach or as a trainer is to stimulate that consistency. And that does take a feedback, an observation, whether that's a quick assessment of their how they're moving that day, or a quick movement assessment, or a quick warm up, and you just noticing that they're a little bit slower or off that day. Then it might be time to like take them to the side and ask what's going on, if there's anything in particular that's holding them back, and if there's any stresses in their life that are being present in that moment, then it's going to affect their presence in the workout and affect the results of the workout and the adaptations that they can get from that workout. And I think a simple way to kind of understand, to connect the dots in people's brains listening, is a little diagram that you sent me from a textbook that I had made into like an infographic. And I think it really does explain and connect the dots for people, because needs lead to drives to produce behavior to attain goals and create satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can't connect the dots of someone's goals back to the behaviors that they need to have, back to the drives that they have and needs to attain those goals, then it's our fault as the professional who's overlooking them in this training program. And that responsibility falls on our shoulders.
Yeah. And I think that's why I saw it and I sent it. I was like, this is kind of it. It's bigger than training, because this is kind of diving into someone's mind.
Psyche.
Right?
Yeah.
And nowhere
1,000%.
in that diagram, and we'll link that in the show notes so that people can see it, is their like performance. It doesn't say performance everywhere. It just says it is based off of their behavior and their drives and what they want to be satisfied with.
Yeah.
It's and like you mentioned, the kind of pulling someone aside. The biggest thing, and I've learned to do, is just ask how they're doing that day. How do they feel? How's their day been so far? You get different responses from everyone, whether it's a morning, midday, or evening client. You're going to get different responses. And then over time, we've learned as coaches how to decipher what some of that means. You get certain answers. Oh, I'm good. Or I'm good today. That's a totally different way of speaking. They say, okay, then you build off of that and you say, okay, what's going on? This is what we have today. If there's anything that we need to modify, we can modify. You kind of give them that option, but you also, I found, you don't pry for that information. You kind of just ask them and see how it's going, what's feeling good, what's going well in their day, what's not. And if they're open, they'll tell you. As you build relationships and build that buy-in through kids and clients and athletes, they'll tell you more and more. And then you take that feedback and you apply, okay, what is really going on in their life, and how can I make sure that I can build a positive environment to gain that satisfaction, or push them into the right direction they need to, and kind of light the fire inside someone. I know that some athletes come in and they don't really want to be there, but they want to get better at their sport. So when you tie that in and say, okay, this is what it's going to be, you create trust, they trust you, and then you believe in them. And then you see things that they might not be able to see in themselves. And then you reestablish that and you reinforce that, and that builds that. And I think that is a key to very much understanding individuals and what their needs are and how you can shape their behaviors towards their goals. And there's
And pushing them beyond their own limits to achieving those goals.
Right.
Because a lot of people don't even believe they can achieve some of these goals from the get-go. And that's usually why they hire a coach or a trainer, is they don't believe it's possible, or they don't see the path to do it. And a lot of the role as the trainer or coach is to push them past their limits. And it does start with the mind, 1,000%, because the mind allows you to do really anything that you want when you adjust your perspective and your attitude.
And we say goals. I don't want to get people confused. It's not just goals in the gym, right? As coaches, we have goals for our clients to reach, benchmarks. Goals in life are things people want to achieve, right?
And the goals in the gym are just like little checkpoints to those bigger
Yes,
goals.
it helps them get there if they want to play with their kids and see their grandkids and be
Right.
healthy for their family or their spouse or anything. Because
Now they do need goals in the gym. Right.
exactly.
Exactly.
And that's how you build the goals in the gym and importance of, squatting and fan bike into their life. Because outside of that, if you don't build that connection, that squat rack, that fan bike does not matter. But once you build that in and you understand the client's needs, you can now have them buy into a program that will help them understand and achieve what they want. And if they can get there, whether it's weight loss, whether it's movement, anything, people feel better. And when people feel better, you now move that needle of needs, behavior, and satisfactions, and it grows. And then you get into these mindsets and you can create this mindset with an individual for the better. And that's where a lot of coaches and trainers need to start getting more mindful in their approaches to training. Clients and athletes need to understand that this is what coaches should be doing and really kind of what you're getting out of a coach. I don't even want to call it trainers anymore, right? Because training, you're just training a thing.
In the gym,
As a coach, we're coaching a lifestyle. We're coaching you to be this on your own.
Well, I think a big problem is just truly getting someone to be open about their mindset, about their triggers, right? Because who wants to admit what pisses them off, or what it's almost like you're exposing yourself. You're being vulnerable. You're saying, here's my kryptonite. Please don't use it against me. And that can be rather daunting. And especially if you're first meeting with somebody, or your only relationship with them is in the gym. So you see them 1 to 3 hours out of the week, and there's 168 hours in the week. So you're trying to juggle a lot. Don't get me wrong, but it's important. And it's important to have these conversations. And you don't need to beat around the bush about it. You don't need to pretend like you're psychoanalyzing them. You just ask them straight up and explain why it's important. Hey, I need to know, I know that this is our goal. I know that this is our agreed checkpoints and process to attaining this goal, but it's my job as the professional to help us stay consistent. And in that endeavor, understanding your personal drives, your personal life stresses, your personal triggers are going to help me to keep the momentum going forward. And I think too often we aren't, at least as coaches, stimulated enough to have these conversations. So as a client, feel free to ask, feel free to talk about it, open up to your coach about it. And honestly, that's a good test, a good litmus test for how good that coach is, the quality of coaching that you're going to get. If you start bringing up that stuff and they get uncomfortable and they just try to redirect and they can't even talk or acknowledge that, or even listen and look in your eyes when you're speaking honestly from your heart on this shit, because it sucks to talk about this stuff, then odds are you're not in the best position for where you need to go.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the aspect of this coaching realm and the fitness realm that I think it needs to change.
It's not a direct science, so it's not talked about often,
And it's a tough thing to do.
That's why I look at Scott Cochran, because he's one of the highest paid strength and conditioning coaches. He's the most successful strength and conditioning coach. And he'll talk about how mind is the number one most important thing. And he works with each individual to overcome their personal setbacks. And another aspect of that is you also don't want to find the coach that's going to sit there and mull in the problem with you. You don't want the best friend as a coach. Same thing that it's like a parent. A parent isn't necessarily your best friend. Sometimes a parent's pushing you out of your comfort zone and it kind of sucks and you kind of resent them in a way. And that's okay. That's part of the process. So you don't want the coach that's going to shy away from these conversations, and you don't want the coach that's going to try to just coddle and mull over the problem too long, because that's ultimately not where you're going to find success. Sure, you have to recognize it, you have to accept it, you have to investigate it, but then you have to separate yourself from it. You have to non-attach from it and move on to the action steps that are going to lead you to your desired outcome.
And people can sense that, and they can tell when you're kind of going through the motions and doing what you just said. They might not give 100% effort. They might not give a lot of effort, because now they know, oh, if I give 100% effort, that it might not, the person's not really going to care, or they're not going to get much out of it, because the coach is like, hey, we're just kind of going through the motions. So people start pulling back and like not giving 70% effort. And it's just another daunting task that they do have to do. They have to show up and they have to go through this workout, and then they're done and they can move on with their day. I think it needs to change where that hour needs to be, I want to call it therapy session, but it's got to be a little bit of both. You got to get that person excited for something. It could be talking about cars. I had a client the other day, we're working out and kind of quiet at first. And then on the TV, there was a car auction show. Boom. Got him talking. And all of a sudden you could see he's excited about something. He starts getting excited about sled pulls. So he gives a little bit more effort. And that's the small things that go, and we need to understand as clients. It's not about that. You're not going to get someone excited for a sled push if they're not excited about something else. So whatever that is, we find that, get excited for it, and you're going to get more effort out of the client. They're going to see more results. They're going to see better performance. They're going to see a plethora of things that they can be able to achieve. And I think that's where we need to start pushing as coaches, and then clients understanding this is where we're going with this.
Yeah. And it's going to happen, in my experience, it happens a lot in the middle of the session, kind of like what you're saying, like in the middle of an exercise or at the end of a heavy set or something. And they can already get better clarity on what it is holding them back. But the more that you can create that channel and that open communication, the more likely that you'll get to that point before the session starts. And that's ideally where I'd want it personally. I like, how's your week been? How'd you sleep? How you feeling this morning? Let's go through some maybe some soft tissue work or light mobility stuff before we get going into our main warm up. And I want to hear them. I want them to talk to me. And if I can sense that something's deeper, I want that out right then and there, because that's going to make or break our session in a way that it's going to always be on their mind, or their mind's going to be reverting back to it. And it's going to be holding back from their presence in the lift or in the workout in general, and going to hinder their performance, which means hinder what adaptation they're going to get out of that workout. So do the best you can to try to get that stuff out early and often as possible, so that you can make it not have a hold on them. So many people are choked up, and that's why it has to come from a heavy lift, is people are like literally strangled by their anxiety, by their emotions, by their feelings, and they have nowhere to turn, and allow that gym to be the outlet for them. And then you'll get much more out of that athlete, that client. All right. Well, I think that's it. We're going to wrap up this episode, short but quick, but sweet and to the point. Not understanding client athletes, their mindset, ambitions, drives, and triggers. Hope you enjoyed. We'll catch you next time. Peace.
If you're ready to make steps towards improving your health or increasing your performance, book a free 30-minute call today by visiting thinkfitnesslife.com.